everyone. Luz Gonzalez here, and this is my friend Matt.
Hello.
And we're going to be talking about not improv, as you might think by our giggles, but actually financial literacy.
Yeah.
So to get started, I'll very quickly share a little bit of my story and why I think financial literacy matters, and then Matt, you can tell a little bit about your story, and then we'll talk about some of the how we've been working together, and then some of the work that you're doing now, and I'll ask you some questions about financial literacy. So, financial literacy and just finances are really emotional and they're very personal. And I know that growing up, we didn't have very much, and so I grew up seeing my family struggle, and I struggled a lot. And I remember being an undergrad, and even though I had a scholarship in undergrad, I had the one scholarship that needed to carry me through like 6 months, and I often found myself not being able to pay for rent, not being able to pay for food, and so that was really frustrating. Fast forward, graduating from law school, I have a great job now. I'm really excited with the work that I'm doing, but I don't know how to manage my money. I don't know, even now that when I think about budgeting, when I think about how do I invest, how do I do all these like adult things, how do I start adulting financially, it's overwhelming even now. And so I started learning about financial literacy, and that's actually what led me to meet Matt. I posted something on Facebook, and my friend David said that I should talk to Matt, and so we met, and we said, oh my gosh, like I care about financial literacy. It's almost criminal how people aren't getting the information and the education that they really need to get, because you're expected to know how to manage your money, and you're not given that. And so we connected, and we've been sort of working on this for some years now. Can you tell a little bit about your background and what brings you to what you're doing now?
Sure. Yeah, I spent about 10 years as a research psychologist. I was focusing on diversity training and how organizations can help people work together a little bit better. And the bigger picture of that was to help make the United States and the world a little bit more equal. And what I found is that in that work, the end product was publishing papers that, if we're being realistic, most people aren't reading.
Yeah.
And I started working on just giving my friends some financial advice based on how I was managing money on my own. And that seemed to really be directly changing their lives in a big way. Started volunteering a few years ago.
I've sat in my car with
on the phone
you and on the phone, and just being like, oh my gosh, this is so overwhelming. Like, I don't know how to think about finances. Please help me. And so,
for a lot of people it's overwhelming, and so my current career focus is how to make this stuff less overwhelming and less confusing. And give
so you worked your way into finance.
Yeah, so this now 3 years I've been at this, and finally kind of nearing the end of the training phase, so to speak, and working for a firm. And we're seeing clients and really dramatically changing people's lives with just a handful of meetings. That's what brings us to our conversation tonight.
Okay, awesome. And so when we think, especially the work that you're doing now, when you think of what people really should be doing but that they're not doing, that you're like, oh, come on, like if you did these simple things, it could really improve your quality of life. What are those things?
Yeah, I think we take a step back. I think I talk to a lot of people who are having that same feeling that you're having of, oh, there's so much to think about. This is so overwhelming. I've got to think about the saving while I'm budgeting and thinking about the future and planning for retirement.
Paying off your loans.
It's too many things, I think, for your typical person. And you're a smart person. If you're having trouble with this, there's a lot of people who don't have the patience for it. I mean, we can show off all the books that we have sitting here, by the way.
These are all the books that
hobby.
And these are just the ones that like
happen to be
are
here.
Physical ones. There's the Audible ones. There's the articles that I've tried to read, and it's really overwhelming to know where to turn. And I feel so fortunate that I'm able to ask you some questions, because then I'm like, okay, I sort of know what I'm doing. But like most people don't have that. So so if there were like
so again, we take a step back. I think this is so important for a lot of people, is to think about this as a lifelong process, and not to have everything be weighed on them at one time. Is to break this up into little pieces that each of these pieces is manageable. And so the first thing is to find out where you are in this process that I think begins with balancing a budget, just getting a positive amount of money coming in every month. And then once you got that, where do you keep some cash in savings? And once you've got enough savings, where do you start investing? And now, once you got that going, you can start thinking about some of these bigger picture insurance policies, retirement planning, and really get to more and more complicated things. But
so even what you're saying right now could be a little overwhelming. So let's start. Number one. Where are you in the process? Okay. Number 2
is find out how to succeed where you are right now. What are the goals that you need to accomplish right now?
Okay. 3.
And what are the resources that you need to be able to do those things?
Okay. 4.
Who can help you to find those resources, get those goals,
5.
and now have the willpower actually stick through and do it.
Okay, so you have the 5. Okay, so hopefully you're going to do that.
Now it's going to get scary.
Now we're going to go and dive into details. So, budgeting. Okay, so when I've budgeted, and oh, this is painful. Like I still have notebooks, and I've been interviewing people, and people have like complicated Excel systems where they have like an Excel sheet, and people are doing all these things to try to get their finances not even in order, to just know where they stand and know like how much am I spending? Like how much should I be budgeting? How do I think about my money? So best practices for budgeting. Right. What do you have for us?
So I think everyone needs to find a system that works for them. There's multiple different ways of doing budgeting, and the most important thing, beyond all else, find a system that works for you. And the 3 systems that I've seen, and there's different slight variations on these 3 systems, but the first one is something that it sounds like you're talking about, and I call counting pennies, or penny pinching. You know where every single expense goes. You know how much you spend on coffee every single day. You know if you put money in the parking meter, how much did you spend? You write all of this down. You keep track of this thing. You look at all the charts and graphs. And
By the way, I'm not doing that.
Good.
I wish I was.
I don't find that to be helpful at all. But a lot of people do that. And that's programs like Mint and Personal Capital, if you're familiar with these. That's what they're trying to get you to do digitally. If that works for you, if that's going to get you to get on top of your spending, then go right ahead.
And so these programs show you where you've spent your money. They don't actually show you how much money you have right now to spend on the specific categories that you're thinking about.
Mint and Personal Capital, those do. Some people aren't incorporating that in their own Excel spreadsheets. But generally speaking, so there's slight variations here and there, but the idea is keep track of every single expense. The issue that I have with that is that, and maybe this is where you're going with this, is that it's descriptive. You know where your money is going. You can describe perfectly where your money is going, but you don't know where your money should be going. You don't know what you should be doing. So they're descriptive, they're not proscriptive. They're not giving you a model of what you ought to be doing.
So I think this is getting outside of the scope of what we want to talk about. What I'm talking about is more of your way of thinking about budgeting would probably be very different of the way that I think about budgeting, and there might be categories that I have for where I want my money to go and how much I want to allot to a specific thing.
So that's process number 2. Right? So the penny pinching one is number 1. That's really common. And that might not work for you. It's not what you do. The next one, I think, from our conversations is what you're into, which is what I call buckets. You have this goal-based way of thinking about money. So the beginning of the month, you've got all your different goals, and you put money into each of these different goals. Sometimes it's buckets, it's envelopes, something like that. And so this is like a little bit of the descriptive, you know, how much goes into each, but it's also proscriptive. This is where I want my money to be going, right? And that's another method. Again, the point of budgeting is to get positive at the end of the month, right? And to start having enough money every month that you're not worried about where it's going, really. So if that bucket method works for you, and you can say, how much do I pay for rent? How much do I pay for my bills and food? And how much am I going to save for the vacation? How much am I going to save to invest, or how much am I going to save to buy the house?
So, by the way, to make my budgeting work for me, what I've actually done is I'm working with a credit union, and I've tried to bootstrap this system where I have 10 checking accounts and I have 10 saving accounts, and I'm trying to make sure that so with this specific credit union, I'm able to designate specific categories. So I have a rent category, I I have a food and bills category. I have these categories are really helpful to me, and so when I'm making payments, my money's coming out of those specific buckets, and so that's super helpful. But like it shouldn't be that hard, and a lot of people just don't have the ability to do that.
Right.
And so what we're talking about is just like some of those best practices for budgeting that people should think about.
Yeah, and so again, some people are into that. That's their system that works for them, that they want to stick with. If that works for them, hey, awesome. Who am I to say? You know? The system that I use that works very well for me is I don't keep track of every expense. I also don't have any of these goals that I know you have. You like the envelopes and 10 accounts. And I have found that doesn't work for me because I find it to be too complicated, and I find it to be a little inflexible. So what happens if you've been saving up for the thing for 2 years and then you don't want the thing anymore? Your life changes, and well, now what do I do with this envelope full of money?
Yeah.
And so my preferred way of doing it is to be 100% proscriptive.
Okay.
So I honestly have no idea how much you spend on food. If someone's like, how much every month you spend on food, I wouldn't know. And maybe that's bad. Again, this isn't for everybody. But for me, I don't really know. Okay. What I do is try to cut my fixed expenses down as low as I possibly can. 2013, I moved 5 times, chasing lower and lower and lower rent every single time. So that by the time I finally settled on a place that had relatively low rent for the Bay Area, I didn't have to worry about money so much anymore.
Okay.
I was saving every month over your typical person hundreds of dollars. Yeah. So it didn't matter much to me whether I went out to that restaurant or whether I packed my lunch or didn't, because it was hundreds of dollars every single month. Do that out over a year, and you're talking about thousands of dollars less in expenses. So I didn't need to save up for some of these goals. I knew if I wanted to do something, I put myself in a position where I can go and do that thing within reason.
Yeah.
And so my model is cut the fixed expenses down as much as you can, really to just the bare minimum. So say things like rent and food. Just don't blow a lot of money every single month. You know that you've got you're spending the minimum amount that doesn't really sacrifice your quality of life. Things that are like fixed wants, like your Netflix or maybe even owning a car if you don't need a car, those things just go entirely. Just get rid of those things. And if you look at the psychology research on this, you find that the fixed wants don't actually improve people's quality of life. People think that they do. They think that having a Netflix account makes them better off. It doesn't work.
So you were talking about 3 kind of ways that, or patterns that you've seen for people budgeting. Yeah. There was the budget every penny. Yeah. There was the categories, and then how would you describe it?
I call this thing heuristic accounting, which is a very psychological label that's terrible, and I need a better one. But the idea is that people are actually very good. If maybe you won't find this necessarily true, but they're very good if you have money in your hand. Yeah. They're actually very good at accounting for that money.
Okay.
And if you think back to our hunter-gatherer ancestors, if you know you've got this many berries, and then it has to get you through the month, you're pretty good at eating them at a good pace. So if you can set up a financial system for yourself that gets you back to that point, I've got this many berries in my hand, rather than how many buckets does my money need to go into, and counting for every single expense individually. You simplify to berries in your hand. You'll be okay. So cutting the fixed expenses.
But still, I got berries in my hand. I want to know where those berries will go, right? Because then it's like,
and
should I send them into
system? It's perfect.
Yeah, send them into my loans, into my investments. But we'll move on to the next thing. So one of those buckets.
It's the next video.
Next video. We'll have a video just on each of these subjects. Yeah. So people talk about, and it's usually recommended that people have an emergency savings bucket. Yeah. Can you talk more about it?
Sure. So I think the first thing to do for everybody is get the budget figured out totally. Then once you're there and you actually have some positive money coming in, the next step is to get an emergency pool of cash.
Yeah. How do you decipher how much you should be saving? So my emergency bucket will probably be different from your emergency bucket. It might be different from someone else. So it might be 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, depending on your circumstances. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So most people recommend between 4 to 6 months of your monthly living expenses saved up in some savings account somewhere.
This is think you should know what your living expenses are, then you multiply that times 4 or 6,
Right.
and then you should have that ready to go in a liquid, accessible place in case something happens, in case you lose your job, in case there's an emergency. You're able to access this money like automatically and immediately.
Right.
But you shouldn't be touching it because it's your emergency savings bucket. So it should just literally be there. Make it a little bit hard for you to access, but make it easy enough that if something came up, you would be able to access it.
Yeah, so usually people put these things in just a separate savings account. If you're working with a credit union like Luce, they'll say, you can just start a new account.
Yeah.
And really, it's just on paper, there's a new account.
Yeah.
That is,
Although,
psychologically
what
set aside.
what I saw was that if I opened it with the same account, what I actually had to do is I opened up a savings account with Capital One, which is actually, it's hard for me to access. It's hard for me to touch. It's hard for me to go in and transfer money. Otherwise, it's really easy for me to transfer money from one account to the other. So I recommend that you guys, for this emergency bucket money, you make it hard to touch.
Even.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I have an account with Barclays. Barclays and Capital One both have higher interest rates than most savings accounts do. So this money that you're not touching is then sitting around making you even more money.
Yeah.
And I think who does 4, who does 6? Think about your own life. How stable is it? Do you have a job that you know you're going to have, right? Mm-hmm. You're not at risk of losing your job.
Are you thinking of moving? Are you thinking of transferring?
Right. Are you in a stable marriage? Are you living on your own? There's all these things that increase the instability in your life. The more unstable, the more money you should have in a savings account.
Great. Now, what about goals? So when we think about what are your best practices for savings goals? How should people think about that? What do you recommend?
Yeah, so I, like we were talking about before with budgeting, I'm so terrible with savings goals. You're really good with them.
I love goals.
Good, bad. My whole thing is if I've got a goal, I can, if some kind of spontaneous thing, I have hopefully set myself up so that I can go and accomplish it.
I will talk about goals.
Good.
So what I've done for my goal setting, what I think and what I've heard from a lot of people that is helpful is you should first pay yourself first. So for your savings, what I have is, I think I'm at least 15% of my income is automatically going into that savings account that I told you guys was hard to reach. So 15% is going straight there, and I'm not touching it. And so that's the money that I'm reinvesting in. We'll talk about investments. So that's the money that I'm using to grow my financial pie. And, we'll talk about compound interest, all those things. In terms of the other pieces, I have goals. And again, because I'm working with this credit union, I'm able to set these sort of categories. So I have a category for Fiji. I have a category for buying a car. I have different categories, and automatically as my paycheck comes in, a certain percentage or a certain amount goes into these categories. And so I don't even have to think about it. I do go in and I see how my money's moving, but based on those goals, I've made a system where I almost don't have to think about it, and I do recommend, especially if you have these goals, if you want to go to Fiji, or wherever it is that you want to go, or if you want to start saving for your child's college education, a car, so I'm saving for a car, you can start seeing how that's accumulating, and that can be really empowering, especially if it's what I've also heard from the financial gurus is automate to the extent that you don't have to manually move around your money, and that you can automate a lot of these processes, whether it be a certain percent of your money, your income going automatically to savings, your bucket, your savings account, whether it be so your emergency savings account is different from these other savings accounts that we're talking about. So your emergency budget or emergency bucket, again, it needs to be liquid, it needs to be easily accessible, it needs to be something that you would be able to access. And then these other ones, they don't have to be that liquid, or maybe they do. I mean, I'm going to Fiji, so I would need to be able to pull it whenever I buy the plane ticket, etc. So that's one way that we can think about savings. Now, you and I both just graduated from school. Well,
God,
from grad school.
Years ago.
Yeah,
We
from
graduated
undergrad a
years
long time
ago.
ago. But we went to grad school,
Yeah.
and so I don't know about
December
you.
2014.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
even before then. May 2014.
No, 13. 13.
Yes,
Yeah.
we just graduated.
Okay.
3 years ago.
Time flies, right? Yeah, I know. It feels like I just graduated.
Yeah.
Anywho, so financial obligations. We have loans. I have loans. What are some of the best practices that you have for people who have student loans? How do you recommend they think about student loans and how to pay those off as quickly as possible?
So I think there's a relatively simple rule of thumb. You can make it more complicated, but I like these rules of thumb. Like you're saying, automate your budget, automate a lot of your decision making as well.
Yeah.
And if you've got a student loan or any loan that's less than about 4% in APR interest rate, I would let that thing ride. Just don't be in a rush to pay it off. Debt can feel, constricting. Debt might not feel very good, but debt with less than about a 4% interest rate.
And what's informing the 4%?
The 4% rule comes from your expected returns on other investments that you might have. And
we'll talk about investments.
And we'll get into that more.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, if you rush to pay off those low interest rate loans, that means you're not investing in something else.
You're losing out on the interest.
Right. So you could be doing better by investing. Let those loans ride.
And I'm guilty I've heard from Matt and I've heard from other people that I should refinance my loans from law school. Right now, my rate is higher than 4%, and especially right now, I think rates are good.
Yeah.
So I should refinance. So you should refinance, and we will work on refinancing together. But that these are things, you have tools, and there are ways that you can be more proactive about paying off your loans. What about timelines? Do you have any thoughts on timelines and having an accurate picture of when you'll be finished paying off your loan?
Yeah, so for those loans where you're talking greater than 4% interest rate, right? In federal loans, they have been around 6.5% for a long time. And the story gets more complicated for some people working in a nonprofit sector, working for the government, who might qualify for loan forgiveness.
So I think it's after 10, 20 years.
So that's
depending
another.
On where,
If that's you, stop listening.
But not really. Keep listening because there's going to be other information.
Yes, for everybody else, above 4%, I would pay those things off. I wouldn't be making just the minimum payments. I would make that one of those buckets, and I would be paying those things off before I went to Fiji, before I bought the new car. Those things are costing you quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
Once they're out of the picture, then you can much more quickly start getting a bunch of goals accomplished really fast, rather than dragging these things out and having that burden on you both financially and psychologically for, hey, some people it's 20, 25 years before they pay the loans off.
Yeah.
The sooner you start making payments on those higher interest loans, the quicker that they're out of your life.
Or refinance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Now, so talking about loans and talking about credit, and so let's talk about credit scores and credit cards. So many people have been paying so many things off with their credit cards.
Yeah.
What thoughts and best practices do you have around if you have credit cards, if you have multiple credit cards? How do you recommend that people think about their credit cards and building credit score? So your credit score, I didn't know what a credit score was till I was an adult, because in my family it wasn't a thing, and so.
Sure.
So what thoughts do you have? What recommendations?
Yeah, I say credit cards can be either a very bad thing for people who overspend. Credit cards can be one of the worst financial products that are out there for people who overspend on what they have. And there's all sorts of reasons why some people fall into this trap of paying too much interest and overspending on those. Credit cards, on the other hand, can be a very positive thing for people who spend within their means, who can accumulate reward points, who can boost up their credit. Yeah. So for people who have maybe not as much money or some problems with overspending, maybe cut up your credit cards. That's, I think, the
But what
Dave
about
Ramsey,
not having?
Susie Orman.
Yeah. What about not having credits?
And then, if we even take a step back, you know about credit score. Credit score to me is one of the most overblown things in personal finance. Where you get good credit from is paying your bills on time, doing the right thing with your money, behaving in a financially responsible way. Worrying about the credit score might not actually get you to accomplish those goals. Credit score includes a lot of your financial life, but it does not include some very important things. It doesn't include net worth at all. There's no room in a credit score for your net worth. There's no room in a credit score for your income. Those are really important things to banks when they're going to try to give you a mortgage. It's really important things to a car company if they're going to give you a mortgage.
Or even some other things, like how if you're paying your rent every month, if you're paying these other things, like often that's not seen. It's not shown in your credit score, which, by the way, we'll be working on that.
Yeah. So don't worry too much about the credit score. Focus on using credit cards responsibly. The bigger benefits of using credit cards are mostly the reward points you get, the sign-up bonuses that you get, far more for your typical person than raising your credit score. Use credit responsibly. You're going to get a credit score over 750. That's going to happen. It might take a little bit longer than if you game the system, but it's going to happen. And once it's over about 750, most people don't care.
Okay, great. Now, what about... So when you get to a point... So I know that when I graduated from law school, I was like, okay, making some money. Yeah. Now I need to start investing. And I was like, oh, how do I invest? And I tried to read books, and it was, again, overwhelming. I think when we talk about finance, it's just the word overwhelming keeps coming back.
Yeah. Simplify.
Yeah, we'll try to simplify. So I started thinking about investments and how do I invest, and read some books, and we'll talk about resources a little bit later. So what are your best practices and, think about when it comes to investments?
Right. My attitude towards investing fits in the same way with my attitudes towards building up your savings account and dealing with budgeting. Investing is part of a lifelong process of managing your finances. Once you got your budget straightened out, you've got enough in emergency savings, now it's time to think about investing. Investing is often portrayed as something that's extremely complicated, as only for these people working on Wall Street who study these things in super detail, and I don't think that's really true. For a typical person, you could buy a handful of index funds, which are funds that are put together to mirror the market. You can buy these things from Vanguard, Fidelity, Wealthfront, Betterment. There's all sorts of places you can go to.
And there's a lot of research that says if you invest in what's called this index fund, so Warren Buffett, phenomenal guy, he had this 10-year challenge, and he said for all of these money managers, if you can beat the index record for the 10 years that the challenge is in place, I will give you $1 million, or I don't know how much it was. But no one beat the market. No one beat the indexes that were out there. And so he says, especially what he says, if you are not a professional investor, and if investing isn't what you do for your career, you really should be looking at, and you should be investing in these
in these broad funds.
Exactly.
If you look at a lot of the research on this, and there's quite a bit of it, once you account for the fees that you're paying an investment manager,
fees are huge.
The fees can be huge.
You need to know about your fees.
Yeah, only about 10% of investment managers are able to beat a broad index fund after you account for fees. 10%. So the odds are the person that you're hiring to manage your money for you, or you managing your own money, the odds are you're not beating one of these really cheap funds. So my thing is simplify. Start investing in some broad index funds. Find one of these companies that's going to definitely very cheap.
Some of these easy ways to get started. I know that Vanguard is an easy way to get started. Yeah. I got started with Wealthfront. Wealthfront does have higher fees than the Vanguard, but there might be some advantages there. So I'm still trying to figure it out. But in general, know about your fees. And then something that people don't know about that's actually really important is for their 401ks. For your company, your company might be offering a 401k, but behind that 401k there might be fees, these really high fees that are cutting into your investments, and maybe your employer doesn't even know about that. So just take a look into that. We'll talk about resources, where to learn more about these things later. But fees are a huge thing. So investments, you're saying, look at index funds, look at low fees. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, the number one predictor of better investment returns is having low fees. That's the number one.
Yeah.
Find the cheapest index fund that's out there that mirrors the total world market, and you're going to be doing just fine. If you think about it as a long-term process, sometimes the market goes up, sometimes the market goes down. Generally speaking, it's going to even out around 5.5%, 6%, something like that. If you think of it like a savings account, what are you earning on your savings account? It's not 6%, it's probably 1%. Just do the
if 1%.
If 1%.
Yeah.
So broad market index funds, leave it in there, and you're going to be
So when we talk about investments, we're talking about compound interest. Talk about compound. What is compound interest and how does it work?
Sure. So compound interest is the idea that in year one, let's say you earn 10% interest on some $100 investment that you have. In that first year, 10%, you're going to get $10, 10% of 100. In year two, you've now got $110. But you don't earn another $10. You now earn even more. You earn $11, 10% of 110. You're earning interest on your interest. And that interest then builds up.
Same is true for your loans.
And up. Oh, yeah. It works against you if you're going to debt.
So pay off your loans.
Yeah. If you're investing, you're earning this compound interest that's working for you. So a couple things is start investing. That's one.
Once you've paid off those over 4%.
Those evil bad debts.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that the earlier you invest, the better off you are. Even just a little bit of money early on ends up compounding and making a lot
They've
more
done
money
these
later on.
studies where they have like siblings, same life circumstances. They started with the same investing amount, but one started at 22 and one started at 30 years old. And at the end, how much they make, it's a big difference.
Yeah.
It's a huge difference.
Yeah, it's a very common thing when I'm teaching financial literacy courses. We have a comparison of someone who at 18 years old invested from 18 to 30 and put in, say, $5,000 a year and was earning 10% a year on those investments. And then we have another person, a sibling, who starts at 31 and invests all the way to 65.
And they're investing a lot more money.
Yeah, over their lifespan, they're investing so much more, but they end up with, say, half as much money overall.
Yeah.
So
if you're young, start investing.
Start
Even if
investing.
it's a little bit, it's meaningful. It matters. If you're older, start investing, especially if you've paid off your loans. It adds up. What about so if you're investing, we had the crash in 2008.
Yeah.
And we've had these other events in our history. How should people think about the money that they're making in terms of their investments and things that could happen just historically to throw that off?
Yeah, so if you look at what happened in 2008, that was the worst financial collapse we've had in the stock market since the Great Depression. That was not like a little blip in the radar. That was really an important thing. Even then, what happens for people who just stuck around, stayed in the market from 2008? By 2013 or so, they were right back to where they were before. This is the second worst financial disaster, arguably, in American history, and people were right back up 5 years later. So unless you were retiring in 2009, that's pretty bad. But if you can stick around, wait out the market a little bit, it's going to come around. Don't panic.
As we've talked about, finances are these very emotional, it's an emotional experience. And what people say, if you want to be an investor, if you want to be managing your money, it's not about the emotions. It's you have to sit it out. You have to just there are patterns in the market, and you have to let that ride out. And you can't react emotionally. If you're reacting emotionally to some of your finance, like if the stock market's going up and you're like, oh, I need to pull my money, like maybe that's not the best thing to do. Don't react emotionally to your financial decisions.
Right, and if you're in some of these broad index funds, you're not investing in particular stocks, I think that helps ease a little bit of that emotional reactance that people can have. And if you are at a point where you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars invested in the market, which for some people watching that might feel like a lifetime away, but that will be quite a few people in a few years. then you can start getting into more complicated things. So now you're even further down that process, and there's many things that you can do to avoid having the pitfalls that we saw in 2008. And someone who is doing some of these more complex things, which might require a financial advisor to help set up, you could have avoided the big pitfalls in 2008. If you're just starting out, you got $5,000 in the market, probably not worth your time. But if you've got $1 million, then there's some more complicated things you can do.
Something that I recommend that I know that I've done to the extent that I can. So you think about pre-tax, and so there are like Roth IRAs. That means that as you are putting in your investment money, you're being taxed right now for that money, and so then you don't have to worry about taxes at the end when you pull out your money. And then for other retirement vehicles, you get taxed when you pull out your money. And so that's just, I'm not going to recommend do one thing, do the other thing, but like that's just something to keep in mind, to think about taxes and think about when you want, when you start investing, when do you want your money to be taxed, because it will be.
Yeah, and these things can save you quite a bit of money going forward. The idea of a Roth IRA, traditional IRA, 401k, and so on and so on, these are all ways to just help eliminate a little bit of taxes. The government has set these things up to try to encourage people to save. And try to take advantage as much as you can. They're there to help people save.
The limit for a Roth is $5,500.
Yep.
And then that's a year. And then for your 401k, to the extent that you can, you should be contributing whatever your employer is matching, because that's free money. And so you don't get free money any other way, for the most part. So if you're getting free money from your employer, you should be taking advantage of it. But you should also ask your employer about those fees. And your employer actually has a legal obligation to be giving you the best, they need to be doing right by the interest that you're getting.
Not true, Luce.
Yeah.
No.
Tell me more about that.
So,
that's what I read.
Yeah. So a big law just got passed about, say, a few weeks ago from the time that we're filming this, that finally did what you are saying. That historically, people managing 401ks were not held to a standard that meant they had to do what's best for the people investing in 401ks. What has been legal is that people managing 401ks can do what's not bad for you, but not necessarily what is really in your best interest, which is kind of shocking maybe to lots of people with 401ks. I know. So this new rule just got passed that says, hang on, if you're managing someone's 401k, you have to do what is in that person's best interest.
Well, there we go.
That law does not start until January 2018. So for the next year and a half, we're still beholden to these old rules. So stay tuned, and hopefully things are going to get better for
Although there was something that I read. Well, we'll get back to you guys about that being so we'll get back to you. Now, resources. So when I think of resources, I'm going to have to reach over here. These are some of the books that I have, and you guys know I love my books. One of the, the reason that I can talk to you in the way that I can about understanding what a Roth IRA is and ask Matt more intelligent questions, really, it comes from this book. So this is Tony Robbins.
The ever handsome.
Money Master the Game. It's a beast. It's thick. I did it on Audible, and then I just thought the information was so good that I needed to get it in print as well. Audible was about 35 hours or something. It's like a college course. But after reading this book, I finally felt like I could talk about compound interest. Like, I understood what a Roth IRA. I didn't feel dumb having conversations about finances. And so, highly, highly, highly recommend this book, especially if you're just getting started. It's a really good place to get started. These are other books that I've heard about from people, and I have not finished reading them yet. But these are books that I've heard from people that are good books to look at if you are married, if you are getting married, and you're going to need to join finances. There's How to Talk About Money, Getting Financially Naked. So with your partner, making sure that you know where your finances stand. And I mean, we hear about this. Most they're like the number one reason for fights in couples are finances.
Yeah, number one reason for divorce.
For divorce. And so to the extent that you can, figure out your family finances, figure out your relationship finances, especially if you're getting married. You should know where you stand. I heard about this one again, A Modern Girl's Guidance to Personal Finance on my own 2 feet. Again, have not finished it, but it's sitting in my library. And then we've all heard about Susie Orman. I've not read it. I was going on a run, and I found this, and I was like, oh my gosh, I care about financial literacy, so I should. The ever handsome Susie Orman. I figured, like, let me see what she says. But a lot of people love her. They love what she has to say. But of all these resources, if there's one that you pick up, especially if you're just starting, which again, I felt dumb sometimes having these conversations, and that's really not empowering. And so reading this book made me feel like I could have conversations at just like a whole different level, and that's a really empowering thing to do, and a place to be, which is what we're trying to do here. It's all about financial empowerment, and that's something that we're both committed to. Can you talk about resources that you recommend?
Yeah, I think it's important to, again, remember where you are in this process. If you're focused on budgeting, you just need to get to a point where you're not losing money every month. Try to find some resources that resonate well with you. Investopedia is a website that I like quite a bit. It's got some really tailored articles. NerdWallet and Bankrate, Credit Karma, all websites that pump out a lot of articles that you might find very helpful. Some websites specifically for budgeting are Mint, Personal Capital, LearnVest, Future Advisor. Any of those things I think are going to be fine for you.
Company that's coming along. We'll tell you more about that.
All right. And if you're at the point where you're looking for emergency savings, again, those same resources I said before, look up the savings articles on that. I look into online banks, Barclays, Capital One, GE Capital, Ally. Those are all resources I think are really helpful. And just your local credit union, I think, is.
By the way, we are not partnered with any of these names. This is literally just Matt and Luz sitting here having a conversation with you, sharing what we know, and then sharing hopefully some resources and information that will make your life better and make dealing with your finances a little less overwhelming.
Yep.
Now,
we talked about investing resources. The ones we'd say, again, to remind you, Vanguard, Fidelity, Wealthfront, Betterment are some of my favorite ones. If you want to learn more, check out some of these books, some of the online resources, and then actually go to visit those companies' websites and check them out for those index funds.
And if you guys have questions, just post them in the comment section, and we'll be happy to reach out. We'll share information about how to reach both myself and Matt afterwards. Now, so I'm okay. I'm not struggling anymore. And even now, I've been looking for a financial advisor for at least a couple of years. And it's been really disheartening when I've had this conversation with potential financial advisors, with my credit union, with my bank. What I've heard is, you don't make enough money right now for me to want to be your financial advisor. So how does one find and think about a financial advisor? And what is the difference between a financial advisor and a fiduciary? Because there's a huge difference, and you guys need to know about these differences. Because with a financial advisor who is not a fiduciary, you're going to have fees, and they're not going to have your best interest at heart. Whereas with a fiduciary, they have a legal obligation. So Matt can talk more about that.
Yeah, so to your first point, it might be very difficult for you to find a good financial advisor if you don't either have a high income or a lot of money already. A lot of financial advisors have minimum net worth of $500,000. That's generally considered to be a low amount. People who are charging fees only might have hourly rates north of $200 an hour, which might be pretty off-putting if you're struggling with money as it is. So it can be very difficult.
If you're not struggling with money, it's a lot of money.
So that's, to me, a weakness of the field of financial advising, financial planning. There are people trying to open up financial advising to a mass market. If you look at, say, LearnVest and Future Advisor, they're trying to do it online. There are some people who are in person trying to do that, and you can search for some of these people online. There's some people on Yelp. There's a few networks of financial advisors, and you might reach out to them and say, what are you willing to do to work with someone who doesn't have a lot of money? But it's going to be difficult.
And I've had these conversations, and it's led nowhere. So it might feel frustrating, but it's worth it to keep looking to find a fiduciary specifically.
Yeah, and to then that next point, the difference between a financial advisor and fiduciary. Financial advisor in the United States can actually mean a lot of things. There's a really big bubble of the number of people who can call themselves financial advisors, and that makes the United States unique among a lot of Western countries. In a lot of other parts of the world, if you call yourself a financial advisor, you have to be a fiduciary. You have to be looking after the best interests of your clients. That's not actually true in the United States.
No, it's not. So you may have a financial advisor who actually doesn't have your best interest at heart.
Yeah, and that can be pretty scary.
You need to ask, yeah.
We talked earlier about a lot of 401k managers have not been legally required to look out for your best interest. They only are held to a standard of what's called suitability. They have to find something that's not bad for you, that's not necessarily what's good for you. So if someone has what is called the CFP designation, a Certified Financial Planner, they are required to be held to a fiduciary standard. They have to look out for you.
And that's what you have right now.
That's what I'm working towards right now. I'm a CFP candidate. Candidates also held to that standard. Find one of those people. Yeah. That said, they might be more expensive. If you go to a bank branch, some of those people have CFPs, some of them don't. Ask around and see who you're actually working with. Same idea for someone who's managing your investment funds, say with the 401k.
Yeah, and there's going to be a follow-up video where we're going to talk more about the work that a fiduciary and a financial advisor might do. We're already coming up to about 45 minutes, so we're going to start wrapping this up. But hopefully this has been a primer to get you interested and know about some of the things that should be on your radar. I know that hearing this video or watching this video would have been really helpful for me. When I started on my quest for learning more about financial literacy. And so, Matt, thank you so much for the work that you're doing and for caring so much and for your time here today.
Yeah, of course.
Now, so if you guys have follow-up questions, if you want to reach either of us, we're both committed to financial empowerment, and we're working on it every day. You can reach me via my Facebook group or Facebook page, so Luz C. Gonzalez on Facebook. It's the public page. On my website, luzcgonzalez.com, on LinkedIn, and just comment here, and I'll make sure to get back to you. And Matt? mjgorin@gmail.com, www.mattgorin.com, and from that website you can find every other way to reach me. Great. And so if people were interested in working with you as their financial advisor or fiduciary, is that the best way to do that?
We can start there, sure. You can also find me at www.arete-ws.com. I'm a financial planner with Arete Wealth Strategist.
All right. Well, thank you guys. I know that it's a long video, but it's really helpful information, and hopefully it can empower you to know some of the next steps that you should be aware of thinking and taking. So thank you again for joining us. We are going to have a follow-up video and follow-up videos just talking about finances and each of these pieces. There's probably going to be a course that's coming out, so stay tuned.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.